"Susanna Donnell," Cressida Calder announced into the microphone, "you won't be leaving here with your name, your children, or your future. Consider this your final moment pretending to belong." The band stopped playing. Someone dropped a champagne glass. The sound of it shattering was the only applause she got, but she bowed anyway. I stood under the wedding lights that were supposed to celebrate me, not gut me. The guests stared with a hunger that made my skin feel thin. Whispers crawled across the room like smoke. Tommy didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. He just stood beside his mother, adjusting his cufflinks like this humiliation was rehearsed. I didn't move, I didn't cry, I didn't give them the collapse they expected. My heart was beating steadily, too steadily, because 5 hours earlier, while everyone decorated this hall with roses and linen and false congratulations, I had found a folder in Cressida's private office. A folder with my name on it. A folder containing something so disgusting, so illegal, so life-altering, I still don't know how I stayed standing. And none of them knew that I had already taken photos of every page. Sometimes the loudest moment in your life is the one where you decide not to fall. The room waited for my reaction the way people wait for a car crash, hopeful, entertained. But inside my calm, a quiet truth formed. They thought they were destroying me. They had no idea I had just discovered the one thing that would destroy them instead. And that is where my story begins. My name is Susanna Donnell, and I learned young that in some families love is conditional, but ownership is absolute. People assume a name is something you're given at birth. Mine was something people kept trying to take. I grew up quiet, observant, the kind of child adults mistake for unimportant because she doesn't make noise. My mother used to say, invisible girls survive longer. I didn't know then how literal that warning would become. I was 19 when I met Tommy Calder, and 20 when I first entered the Calder estate, a place where every hallway smelled of money and polished cruelty. Tommy moved through life like everything was already his, and his family treated him that way, the golden son, the future heir, the chosen one. I wasn't chosen, I was tolerated. Cressida Calder looked at me the way people examine expiration dates, with suspicion, calculation, and quiet contempt. But I didn't know her plans yet. Not then. I didn't know she'd spent years rewriting my story behind my back, rewriting my marriage, rewriting my motherhood, rewriting my entire identity piece by piece until the only thing left was a shadow shaped like a girl she could control. I wasn't raised to take up space, but someday even shadows learn the shape of their own fire. Back then I thought I was marrying Tommy. I didn't understand I was marrying into a dynasty that specialized in taking things quietly, legally, permanently. And by the time I realized it, they already had their hands around the two things I loved most, Ari and Lies, my children, my heartbeat, my entire reason for breathing. The Calders stole them before I understood what was even happening, but this is not the chapter where I break. This is the chapter where I learn exactly what they are capable of and start preparing for the day I tear it all back. Most people imagine losing their children as a scream, a violent ripping, a door slammed mid-argument. Mine was quieter, more calculated, more permanent. Ari was 4, Lies had just turned 1. I still remember the morning it happened, the smell of oatmeal, the soft cartoon chatter, the yellow light spilling through our tiny apartment window. I was tired, the heavy kind of tired that sits inside your bones after too many sleepless nights with a baby on your chest. Tommy stood in the doorway holding a manila envelope. "Sign these," he said. No explanation, no warmth, just the impatient tone of someone delivering instructions from above. I asked what it was. He didn't answer, he didn't have to. Cressida walked in right behind him. Perfume first, then power. "We're helping you, Susanna," she said, as if that made it true. "Motherhood is overwhelming for some women. These papers give us temporary guardianship until you're back on your feet." Temporary, that word has teeth. I looked down at Lies sleeping against my shoulder. I looked at Ari, who was drawing a crooked sun with mismatched crayons. I should have said no. I should have screamed. I should have read every line. But I was exhausted, hormonal, recovering, scared, and they knew it. They placed the papers on the table, getting my pen before I fully understood what I was signing. A signature made with trembling fingers, a signature that cost me everything. They left with my children that afternoon, calling it a trial period, a rest, a break. But when I arrived at the Calder estate the next day, the gates didn't open. The guard said, "Mrs. Calder said you're not cleared today." Mrs. Calder, not me. Some kidnappings don't involve force, just paperwork, a pen, and a woman too tired to fight. That night I lay on the floor of my silent apartment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the shape of my children's absence pressed down on my chest, until breathing felt like betrayal. I called Tommy, he didn't answer. I texted, he didn't reply. And in that moment, loneliness wasn't just an emotion, it was a place, a locked room. I didn't know it yet, but I had just entered the longest, coldest season of my life. And the Colders had just committed their first unforgivable mistake. They believed the girl who signed quietly could never rise loudly. There are winters that never touch the calendar, only the soul. The years without my children were like that, a season that never ended. People talk about loneliness like it's silence, but real loneliness is sound, the echo of a child's laugh that isn't there, the hollow rattle of toys that no longer have owners, the whisper your mind makes when you fold tiny clothes with no tiny bodies to fill them. For 2 years my life was a loop: work, cry, sleep, repeat. Cressida rarely allowed visits. The children get confused, she said, confused, as if love was a complication, as if motherhood was optional, as if I were a visitor in the lives I created. Tommy was worse. His absence was a kind of cruelty only cowards perfect. Sometimes he would send a 2-word message, busy today, or not convenient. Eventually he stopped replying at all. I learned to measure time by disappointment. I learned to eat standing up because sitting made the silence too loud. I learned to keep the apartment spotless because any mess felt like proof that I was failing, even without anyone there to judge. And I learned something else too: people don't become cold overnight, they freeze degree by degree. The Colders didn't just take my children, they took my voice, my certainty, my identity, my sense of belonging. But even in the darkest months, something small, something stubborn stayed lit inside me. A spark, a refusal, a quiet awareness that someday, if I didn't break, I might use everything they did to me as fuel. Even a woman buried under grief grows roots, and roots given enough time crack stone. The night that awareness became a decision is burned into memory. I was cleaning the apartment again when I found Ari's little blue sock tucked behind the couch. I held it against my chest and sobbed until the floor felt like part of my body. But when I finally stood up, trembling, swollen-eyed, exhausted, I didn't feel weak. I felt awake. I wiped my face, grabbed my notebook, and wrote the first sentence of the plan that would ultimately destroy the Calder Empire. They took everything quietly. I will take it all back quietly. The night I wrote that sentence, I will take it all back quietly, something in me shifted from surviving to strategizing. Revenge didn't begin with fury. It began with a file folder. I didn't know what I was looking for at first. I only knew this: Cressida had tricked me once with paperwork. She would not trick me again, so I started with the things I could control. Bank statements, old voicemails, emails, receipts from the hospital, anything with a date, a signature, a detail. There is a particular strength that comes from reading your own past like a crime scene, and that's exactly what it was. The first red flag I found was almost nothing: a $250 charge from a notary service dated 2 days before Liz was born, 2 days before the temporary guardianship documents. My stomach dropped. Why would Tommy need a notary then? And why was it charged to our joint account? I printed the statement and highlighted the charge in yellow, my first piece of real evidence. Then more things started falling into place. A recorded voicemail of Cressida saying, "Don't worry, Tommy, she'll sign anything right now. Exhaustion is useful." Screenshots, screenshots, screenshots. I felt sick, I felt angry, but I also felt steady, like the fog was finally lifting. And then came the moment that truly changed everything. I remembered that the day Ari and Liz were taken, Cressida had placed a leather folder on my table, the one with the guardianship papers. She always carried it everywhere. She treated it like a holy book. 2 years later, on a hunch, I searched online for images of Calder family charity events, fundraisers, galas, anything where that folder might appear. And in a photo from a Calder Foundation dinner, there it was in Cressida's hand, open just enough for a page to show. Zoom in more, zoom until the pixels almost cracked, my breath caught. The signature on the visible page wasn't mine, not even close. The handwriting curved wrong, the loops were too tight, the slant was reversed. A forged signature, on a legal document involving my children. I stared at the screen until my fingers went numb. Sometimes the evidence you need isn't loud, it's a whisper hiding in plain sight. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, illuminated by the glow of the laptop, assembling a story the Colders never wanted me to tell. A story made of paper, proof, dates, patterns, lies. A story that would one day become their downfall. And that was when I made the decision that changed the trajectory of everything. I was going to find a lawyer, and I was going to build a case so airtight it would suffocate them. Attorney Lior Shaw didn't look like the kind of person who unraveled dynasties. She looked like the kind of woman who rinsed her coffee mug before anyone else arrived. But the moment she scanned my folder, the forged signatures, the guardianship papers, the notary record, I watched her expression sharpen. She leaned back in her chair, interlaced her fingers, and said, "Susanna, this isn't custody. This is fraud so sophisticated it's almost arrogant." Almost arrogant, exactly like the Colders. I expected pity, or judgment for not fighting sooner. Instead, she said, "You've survived what most people never escape, now we end it, quietly." Her confidence steadied my shaking hands. For the first time in years, I felt the possibility. Sometimes the first person to believe in you is the one who understands the enemy you're facing. Lior slid a legal pad toward me. "From this moment forward you document everything, every word, every meeting, every slip they make. You're building a case, not seeking permission." And from that moment I wasn't a victim anymore. I was preparing for war. The Calder estate was practically a museum of glass walls and secrets. One afternoon, Lior suggested I record every visit. "People like the Calders can't help revealing themselves," she said. She was right. During a scheduled visit, Cressida stepped away to take a call. Her voice carried through the hall. "Tommy, custody is secure. She's too broken to challenge anything. Just keep her tired." Keep her tired. The cruelty in those 3 words felt surgical. I pressed record without hesitation. Ari peeked from his room. "Mommy, why are you sad?" I knelt and kissed his forehead. "I'm not sad, I'm learning." Truth doesn't always scream. Sometimes it's a whisper you catch only because you've learned to stand still. That recording would become one of the most important pieces of evidence in my fight, but I didn't know that yet, not even close. Tommy finally came to see me. He stood in my doorway, hands in pockets, posture casual, like a man visiting an old neighbor, not the wife he'd abandoned. "You shouldn't make things complicated," he said. "Everyone's happier this way." Everyone except me, except Ari and Lies, except the family he destroyed. I watched his eyes dart around my apartment, searching for disorder, weakness, something to justify what he'd done. He found nothing. "I'm filing for full custody," I said calmly. He blinked. "You're joking." "I'm reclaiming everything." He laughed, actually laughed. "You can't win against my family." Oh, but I already had the weapon he didn't know about. Some men mistake silence for surrender, right before it becomes strategy. He left with a smirk. I closed the door with a steady hand, let him laugh. He wouldn't be laughing much longer. I returned to the Calder estate under the guise of a supervised visit. While Cressida prepared Ari's snack, I excused myself to use the restroom and slipped into Tommy's old study. Files everywhere, loose papers, private email printouts, and right there, half exposed in a drawer, a trust fund document with my forged signature. My heart hammered. A trust set up in my children's names, funded by money siphoned from my inheritance, which Cressida had redirected years earlier. I photographed every page with trembling hands. Footsteps echoed in the hall. I slipped out just in time. "Sometimes the pieces of your stolen life are sitting in the open, waiting for you to be brave enough to take them back." That discovery wasn't just evidence, it was the motive. The Calders weren't protecting my children, they were protecting their access to money, my money. Ria Calder, Cressida's sister-in-law, never liked me, but Ria loved gossip more than she disliked me. During a Calder brunch, she whispered, "You know they tried to rewrite Ari's birth certificate, said you were unstable, wanted Cressida listed as primary guardian." My blood froze. "Why tell me this?" I asked. She shrugged. "Everyone deserves to know who's rewriting their story." She wasn't helping me. She was enjoying the drama, but I didn't care. I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and typed every detail into my notes. Even the cruelest mouths sometimes spit out useful truths. The empire was cracking, and they didn't even see it yet. Lior found him. a junior accountant at a firm the Colders used for private transfers. When he sat across from us, pale and sweating, I realized he wasn't a villain, just a terrified man under billion-dollar pressure. He whispered, "Mrs. Calder shifted funds illegally. If I testify, she'll destroy my life." Lior leaned forward. "If you don't testify, the state will destroy your career anyway." He exhaled, defeated, and handed us everything: wire transfers, backdated signatures, unreported accounts in my children's names, proof Tommy forged my signature twice. Some heroes don't shine. Some simply choose the truth when lying becomes too heavy to hold. The Colders had built their empire on paper, and now paper would dismantle them. Lior submitted the first motion to contest guardianship, motion to investigate fraud, request for emergency review of custody. When the clerk stamped the papers, a tremor ran through me, not fear, recognition. This was the moment I stepped back into my own life. Freedom begins the moment you choose yourself without apologizing. We walked out of the courthouse. The sky had never looked so possible. "They didn't hide it well," Tommy called first. "You're embarrassing yourself," he snapped. "You think a judge will believe you over us?" "Then, Cressida, I raised those children. You're nothing but the womb they came through." My hand tightened around the phone, and I hung up. I didn't yell, didn't defend myself. Silence was more painful for her. Sometimes dignity is the sharpest weapon you own. Within a week, the Calder attorneys contacted Lior. "Fear smells like expensive cologne." We met in a private conference room. Cressida wore pearls and fury. Tommy looked smaller than I remembered. Their lawyer offered a settlement, visitation rights, financial support. In exchange, Susanna agrees not to pursue fraud claims. I looked at the document, then I pushed it back. "No." The room stiffened. "You're making a mistake," Cressida hissed. "No," I said, "I'm correcting one." When a woman stops needing permission, the world notices. Her eyes burned. Good, let her feel the beginning of the end. Later that night, Tommy showed up at my apartment. For the first time in years, he looked afraid. "You're going to ruin everything," he said. "You ruined everything," I replied quietly. "You just didn't think I'd ever fight back." He slammed his hand against the wall beside my head. "I'll make sure you never see those kids again." I stepped back. "You already tried." There is a moment when fear stops controlling you, the moment the threat becomes familiar. I closed the door on him and locked it, both literally and symbolically. All rise. The room felt colder than I expected. Cressida sat confidently, Tommy fidgeted, Marcellus smirked. But when Lior laid out the evidence, the forged signatures, the financial theft, the recordings, the trust fund manipulation, the judge's eyebrows lifted. "This is significant," he said. Tommy shifted, Cressida's smile cracked. For the first time they looked human, breakable. Even mountains crumble when paper proves heavier than stone. The court adjourned, but the war was far from over. Supervised visit, neutral daycare center. Ari ran into my arms so fast I couldn't breathe. "Mommy," he whispered, "I knew you'd come back." Lies touched my face like she was memorizing me. I kissed their hair, their cheeks, their hands. I promised them, silently, fiercely, "I'm not leaving again, not until you come home with me." A child's touch can rebuild a mother's spine. That day became the center of everything, the reason I couldn't lose. During discovery, the Calder lawyer produced a document I'd never seen, an alleged psychiatric evaluation of me, claiming I was unstable, unfit, dangerously emotional, completely fabricated. My hands shook, they were escalating, but Lior smiled, an unnerving, shark-like smile. "Perfect," she said. "Now we can subpoena the hospital and expose every lie they've ever told." Sometimes the trap your enemy sets becomes the hole they fall into first. The twist had backfired, hard. A former Calder nanny contacted us. She said, "There are things you need to know, and I'm done being afraid." She revealed Cressida coached Ari to call her mama. Tommy told staff I abandoned the children. The kids cried for me every night. And worst, documents were burned in the Calder fireplace during my custody break. I recorded every word. Even buried truth grows roots, and someday someone will dig it up. The Calders were crumbling. Financial forensics revealed something shocking. Tommy had siphoned hundreds of thousands from the children's trust. Not Cressida. Tommy, For gambling, vacations, luxury watches. His betrayal was deeper than I imagined. When confronted, he blamed Cressida. She blamed him. They turned on each other so fast it was biblical. Villains devour each other when the lights come on. The judge was watching, and the tide had turned. During a supervised visit, Ari slipped a folded paper into my hand. I opened it in the bathroom. A child's handwriting. "I want to live with you, please come get me." My knees buckled, but that note became crucial. Lior submitted it as emotional evidence. The courtroom went silent. A child's truth is louder than any adult's lie. The judge's face softened. Hope became palpable. Over the next weeks, more evidence surfaced. A deleted email where Cressida admitted she needed control of the trust. Bank records showing Tommy's gambling debts. Testimony from 3 different witnesses who saw me beg for my children back, only to be turned away at the gates. The Colders tried to discredit me. They hired private investigators. They spread rumors. They painted me as unstable, vengeful, manipulative. But every lie they told was met with a document that proved otherwise. Lior was relentless. Every hearing, she brought new evidence. Every objection the Calder lawyers raised, she countered with precision. She didn't just defend me, she dismantled them piece by piece. And slowly, I watched the family that had seemed untouchable begin to crack under the weight of their own corruption. Tommy stopped showing up to hearings. Cressida's confident smile faded into tight-lipped fury. Marcellus, Tommy's father, tried to use his political connections to pressure the judge. It backfired spectacularly when those calls were leaked to the press. The media began to notice. Local news picked up the story. Calder family accused of custody fraud, then regional outlets, then national. The Calders, who had spent decades building their pristine reputation, were now the subject of public scrutiny. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. Social media exploded with opinions. Some people defended the Calders, calling me a gold digger, a liar, a bitter ex-wife. But more people saw through the facade. They saw a mother fighting for her children. They saw a family that had used their wealth and power to steal. And they were furious. The pressure mounted. Calder business partners began quietly distancing themselves. Charity boards asked Cressida to step down. Political allies stopped returning Marcellus's calls. The empire they had built on reputation and connections was crumbling faster than they could repair it. Through it all, I stayed quiet. I didn't give interviews. I didn't make public statements. I let the evidence speak, and it screamed. One afternoon, Lior called me with news that made my heart stop. The judge wants to speak with Ari and Lies, in chambers, privately. My stomach twisted. What does that mean? It means he's taking their wishes seriously. If they express a preference to live with you, it will carry significant weight. I wanted to feel hopeful, but all I felt was terror. What if they'd been coached? What if Cressida had convinced them I was dangerous? What if years of separation had made them forget how much I loved them? The day of the interview, I wasn't allowed in the room. I sat in the hallway, hands clasped so tight my knuckles went white. Lior sat beside me, calm and steady. "Trust them," she said. "Children know the truth, even when adults try to bury it." 45 minutes passed, an eternity. When the door finally opened, the judge's clerk gestured for Lior. They spoke in low voices. I couldn't hear anything. Lior's expression was unreadable. When she came back to me, she was smiling, not her lawyer smile, her real one. "They want you, Susanna, both of them. Ari told the judge he's been counting the days until he can come home. Lies drew you a picture." Tears spilled down my face before I could stop them. I covered my mouth to muffle the sob that escaped. Lior squeezed my shoulder. "We're almost there." The final hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Lior prepared me for every possibility. "They'll try one last desperate move," she warned. "Be ready." She was right. The day before the hearing, Cressida's lawyer filed an emergency motion claiming I had threatened Tommy during a phone call. It was a lie. I hadn't spoken to Tommy in months, but they included a witness statement from someone claiming to have overheard the conversation. Lior tore it apart in minutes. The witness was a Calder employee who'd been fired 3 years ago for embezzlement. His credibility was non-existent. The judge dismissed the motion before we even entered the courtroom. But the attempt shook me. It reminded me how far they were willing to go, how little they cared about the truth. The morning of the final hearing, I dressed carefully. Simple black dress, minimal jewelry, Hair pulled back, I wanted to look composed, strong, stable, everything they'd tried to claim I wasn't. The courtroom was packed, press in the back, supporters on my side, the Colders and their team on the other. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation. The judge entered, we all stood, and then he began. He reviewed the evidence, all of it. The forged signatures, the financial fraud, the recordings, the testimony, the children's wishes. He spoke for nearly 20 minutes, laying out the case piece by piece. And then he said the words that changed everything. Based on the overwhelming evidence of fraud, manipulation, and financial misconduct, this court finds that the original guardianship agreement was obtained under false pretenses and is hereby declared null and void. Furthermore, I am granting full legal and physical custody of both children to Susanna Donnell, effective immediately. The room erupted, gasps, whispers, someone behind me started crying. I sat frozen, unable to process what I just heard. Cressida shot to her feet. Your Honor, this is absurd, those children belong. Mrs. Calder, the judge interrupted, his voice sharp, I strongly suggest you sit down. This court has also referred your case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges including fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. Anything you say right now can and will be used against you. Her face went white. For the first time in years, Cressida Calder had nothing to say. Tommy looked like he might vomit. Marcella stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, refusing to show emotion. Their lawyers shuffled papers, already planning their next move, likely a criminal defense. But none of that mattered to me, because at that moment I had won. The judge wasn't finished. Additionally, I am ordering a full financial audit of all accounts associated with the Children's Trust. Any funds found to have been misappropriated will be returned, with interest. Mr. Calder, you are hereby ordered to cease all contact with the minor children until further notice. Mrs. Calder, the same applies to you. Any violation of this order will result in contempt charges and possible jail time. He banged his gavel. This court is adjourned. Lior grabbed my hand. We did it. I couldn't speak, I could barely breathe. The weight I'd been carrying for years, the fear, the grief, the rage lifted all at once. I felt light, dizzy, free. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, microphones were shoved in my face. Lior stepped in front of me, professional and firm. Ms. Donnell has no comment at this time. Please respect her privacy and the privacy of her children. We pushed through the crowd to her car. The moment the door closed, I broke down. Sobs I'd been holding back for years poured out. Lior didn't say anything. She just drove, letting me cry. When we reached my apartment, she walked me to the door. The kids will be released to you tomorrow morning, she said. 9 a.m, I'll be there with you. I nodded, unable to form words. She hugged me, brief, professional, but warm. You did this, Susanna, you fought and you won, be proud. That night, I cleaned the apartment. I made up Ari's bed with fresh sheets. I set out Liz's favourite stuffed animal. I cooked their favourite meals and stored them in the fridge. I wanted everything to be perfect when they came home. But mostly I just sat in the quiet. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full of possibility. The next morning, Lior picked me up at 8:30. We drove to the supervised visitation centre where the children were being held. My heart pounded the entire way. When we arrived, a social worker greeted us. She smiled warmly. They've been asking about you all morning. She led us to a small room, and there they were. Ari, now 6, taller and more serious than I remembered. Liz, almost 3, clutching a worn blanket. For a heartbeat, we all just stared at each other. Then Ari whispered, Mommy. I dropped to my knees. I'm here, baby, I'm here. They ran to me. Ari crashed into my arms so hard we almost fell over. Liz wrapped herself around my neck. I held them both, crying and laughing and whispering promises I intended to keep. I'm never leaving you again. Never. You're home now, you're safe, I love you so much. We stayed like that for a long time. The social worker wiped her eyes. Lior stood by the door giving us space. When we finally pulled apart, Ari looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Are we really going home with you? Yes, I said, forever. He smiled, a real, genuine smile, and something inside me healed. The transition wasn't seamless. Ari had nightmares for weeks. Liz clung to me constantly, terrified I'd disappear again. They had questions I didn't always know how to answer. Therapy helped, so did routine, so did time. But slowly our little family began to rebuild. Ari started school near our apartment. Liz learned to sleep in her own bed. We developed rituals, pancakes on Sundays, movie nights on Fridays, bedtime stories every single night without fail. The Colders tried to fight the ruling. They filed appeals, hired new lawyers, attempted to paint themselves as victims of a vindictive ex-daughter-in-law. None of it worked. The evidence was too strong. The judge's ruling stood. Eventually, criminal charges were filed. Cressida was indicted on multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. Tommy faced charges related to the embezzlement from the Children's Trust. Marcellus, while not criminally charged, saw his political career implode. The Calder name, once synonymous with power and prestige, became a cautionary tale. Their fall was public, brutal, and complete. Years later, my life looks nothing like I imagined it would. I'm no longer the exhausted, broken woman who signed away her children in a moment of weakness. I'm a mother, a survivor, a woman who learned that the quietest battles are often the most important. Ari is 10 now. He plays soccer and reads fantasy novels and makes terrible jokes that somehow always make me laugh. Liz is 7. She's artistic, sensitive, fiercely protective of her brother. They're both thriving in ways I once feared was impossible. I started a non-profit that helps mothers navigate custody battles, particularly those involving fraud and coercion. I've helped dozens of women reclaim their children, their identities, their lives. Every case feels personal. Every victory feels like my own. The Colders no longer exist in my world. I don't follow their trials, I don't read the articles, I don't care what happens to them. They took years from me, but they didn't take my future. Sometimes, late at night when the kids are asleep, I think about the woman I was in that courtroom, standing under those wedding lights, humiliated and alone, holding on to evidence no one knew I had. I think about how close I came to breaking, how easy it would have been to give up, to let them win, to accept the story they'd written for me. But I didn't, and that choice made all the difference. If you're listening to this story and you see yourself in it, if someone has taken your children, your name, your years, please know this: you are not powerless, you are not broken, you are not defeated. They want you to believe you are. They want you to feel small, exhausted, hopeless. That's how they maintain control. But control is an illusion. It only works if you believe in it. Start small, document everything. Save every text, every email, every piece of paper with your name on it. Find one person who believes you, a friend, a lawyer, a counselor. You don't need an army, you just need a witness. And then quietly, patiently, methodically start building your case. Not for revenge, not for vindication, but for freedom, for truth, for the life you deserve. It won't be fast, it won't be easy.